chairs, Katie, or? Okay.
Yeah, I'll announce the score. That's the story of the worst moment of my life. And that is a touchdown with the conversion.
I was just thinking. Fumble!
I'm gonna go take a trip to help fix the chair. I can't turn it off. I have to be a mensch. I can't turn it off.
It's gonna be so good.
I think we may need some more.
Yeah, watch out. Do we have more we can move?
No, it's great.
Sure. Get my. You got your sound checks?
Oh yeah.
Hello, welcome. We invite you to find your seats. We're going to begin in about 1.5 minutes. And if you are on the ends of the rows, you can kind of scooch towards the middle. We've got some folks in the back that need to find a seat. We have some spots up here. There's some spots over there on the ends.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Welcome. Hello, thank you.
No, that's okay.
If I hear you're freaking out, then I'm worried. Yeah, I'll feel better after. I don't know about this guy in front of me, so I'm a little worried about this.
Welcome. My name is Katie Rome. I am the Director of Connectional Ministries here at First St. Charles, and on behalf of the pastors and staff, welcome. I hope that you all feel safe, welcome, and wanted during your time here. In just a minute, we'll be welcoming Ben Greene up to the stage, who will enlighten us and bedazzle us with his knowledge. But first, a few moments of housekeeping. First of all, I hope you all saw that there are refreshments, there are cookies back in the back, so please eat them, or otherwise we have to deal with them. So please take as many as you want. We also have some water back there. If you need to use the restroom this evening, those are located through the left, up the ramp right there. And then also feel free to get up and move around. If you need a cookie halfway through, no one will judge you for that. We encourage that. Also, when you came in, I hope that you got a handout. If you did not, you can pick one up on the way out, or we would be happy to bring one to you because it includes a kind of an overview of what Ben's going to cover. So if you'd like one, you can raise your hand and someone would be happy to bring one to you. We also had some note cards there. At the end of this presentation, we're going to have a moment for Q&A. And if you'd like to ask a question, we ask that you write that on your note card and then we will collect them. So if you didn't get a note card, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll deliver some out to you as well. You can also use this to take notes or draw a picture or whatever. We're not going to judge you for that. So Ben will be coming up in just a moment. Ben will do his own introduction because he'll do a far better job than I would. But would you take a moment and join me for prayer? God, we thank you for the diversity of creation, for the just the joy and creativity that we see in the world around us. We ask that you would give us open and listening hearts, and that we would grow and learn together here tonight. We love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Friends, Mr. Ben Greene.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. How are we doing today? Excellent. All right. I am so excited to be here. Oh, there we go. Now we're cooking. Hi, everybody. I think it's funny when they give me a microphone because I'm queer, Italian, and Jewish, which is the holy trinity of loud. I know you can hear me. I am so excited to be with you all today. Like I said, I'm Ben Greene. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an openly transgender man, a public speaker, an advocate, an author. I'm also a huge nerd. I have a small dog that I love. My wife is a pediatrician. I read a lot of books. And I tell you all these little facts about me because I like to remind us that this is an issue that a lot of us have heard a lot of things about. Some things good, some things probably not so good. And even for those of us who are supportive, it can be easy to forget that when we're talking about the transgender community and transgender healthcare and all these things, what we're talking about are people. I'm here today as a person, as a fellow human being, sharing my story, talking about what it has meant to me to be on this journey, as well as some data and some strategies for allyship. So however you might have felt coming into this, whatever you might have heard about the transgender community, whatever politics you might hold, I ask that you just take a minute to look at me and not just see the concept, but a person. I am here as Ben the person. A little bit about me. I transitioned when I was a teenager living in small town Connecticut over 10 years ago. When I came out, nobody knew what to do with me. Transgender was not the word anybody was using. So I had to build all my own support systems as I realized I needed them. We didn't have inclusive health classes, so I was teaching the health classes. Our guidance staff wasn't equipped to support trans youth in crisis, so I was training our guidance staff. I wrote our school policies, I formed our school student group. In short, I was jumping out of a plane with a tarp and a sewing kit. So now as a transgender adult, I get to be the parachute factory. I get to work with companies and hospitals and schools and congregations and families and anyone who will listen. Over 150 PFLAG chapters, organizations like NASA and Johnson & Johnson and the WWE, anywhere I can, even just people on the airplanes that are unfortunate enough to sit next to me. I am always talking about how we can build a world that is a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more loving. So that is the perspective I'm bringing today to talk about trans inclusion with you all. So we're going to start with a couple of survey questions. I've heard you all are big fans of polls and quizzes and trivia. So we're going to start with a little bit of that. So our first one is up on here. And we have a QR code. So take your phone out, go into the camera app, and then you're going to point it right at that QR code there on the right side of the screen. A little link should pop up, and we are going to click on it, and then answer the question. So the question is, when is the first time you remember meeting a transgender person? So this does not mean seeing one on TV. This doesn't mean hearing about one in politics. Your first human-to-human interaction of finding out that somebody around you was transgender. So scan that QR code. If anybody needs help, raise your hand. We've got plenty of people who are ready. We need some help in the back corner over there. If anybody needs help, let us know. You don't have to actually take the picture, just point it at the code, and then you can click on the little link that should pop up. And then I'll come and stand. Okay, in the 2020s, we're getting a good mix here. 1970s, got a couple down there.
I don't know QR code.
Another
Try it.
40 seconds. A lot of 2020s. I love that. This data that we're getting in already is reflective of what I think is one of the funniest statistics about the trans community, which was that for most of the 2010s, more people in America believed that they had met a ghost than had met a transgender person. So you can see why a lot of people were so frightened or so angry. They were much more focused on the ghosts than they were on us. We've done a pretty good sprint, and even though it might feel really new, this community is one that has been around for quite a long stretch of time. For as long as there have been humans, there have been what we might now call transgender people, even if those weren't the words they were using at the time. So now I want to go to our next question, and we'll get a little bit more historical with some trivia. When was the first transgender health clinic opened? A health clinic focused on serving transgender people through things like hormone therapy, surgeries. When did that start? So go ahead and put in your guesses. 85, 68 are leading currently. We'll give it just another moment. Okay. So the correct answer is 1919. The first transgender. I know, right? Isn't that cool? Yeah. The first transgender health clinic was opened in Berlin, Germany by Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. He was a gay Jewish man who was recognizing that so many people were not getting the support and resources that they need. So he opened what is called the Institute for Sexual Medicine. The Institute for Sexual Medicine was amazing. They did gender-affirming surgery, they did puberty blockers, they did hormone therapy, they did research. Millions of books and documents and studies that they collected about what it meant to be a transgender person. They also had housing for transgender people who were struggling. They held public tours and information sessions. People would actually travel from all around the world to come and meet Dr. Hirschfeld and meet the transgender people who would walk them around the center, show them the resources, have lunch with them. It was good old-fashioned community outreach. It was amazing. Most people have not heard anything ever about the Institute for Sexual Medicine, or at least you don't think you've heard anything about it. If you have ever seen a picture of book burnings during World War II by the Nazis, the most famous picture of the book burnings was the burning of the Institute for Sexual Medicine. It was one of the first targets. So all that research, when people say, we don't have any research, we don't have any data, we did. It got burned by the Nazis in World War II in Germany. So recognizing that, again, even if it might feel really new, and even if that history isn't easily accessible to us right now, it's there. We've been here. We've been around for a while. That's over 100 years of transgender people living and accessing healthcare in many of the same forms that we have it today. All right, we have one more question in our poll, and then we'll get into our content. How many transgender people do you think currently live in the U.S.? Your best estimate. And this is a guess as recent as you want. They just finished doing this study in August of this year, so we've got some pretty up-to-date data. We've got some 3 million, 6 million, 20 million, 800,000. Good blend. I'll give it 15 more seconds. All right. We are accurate on this one. 3 million is the correct estimate of the number of transgender people in the U.S.
got that one right.
With the amount we talk about it, you'd think it's a lot more. That is less than 1% of the entire population of the United States, and yet is such a major focus of a lot of people. For such a small community, we sure do take up a lot of airtime. That's okay though. All right, let's switch back over to the slides. Great job on the poll, everybody. There won't be any more of the poll questions, so you can put your phones away. Unless you want to text your friends and be like, oh my God, Ben Greene is so cute. Then you can take your phone out, that's okay. So, before I get into my content, I have a story that I'd like to tell. And if you all, some of you I saw on Thursday, so you're gonna realize how canned all of my jokes are. I have a story I like to use to introduce every presentation I give. It's about when I first came out. So I came out in 2015, and I had no idea how anyone around me was gonna take the news. And I said, I don't know how they're gonna react in person. I think I'm gonna play it safe and come out over Facebook. And some of you can maybe already tell where this is gonna go. I made my Facebook post, and I said, I'm transgender, here's what that means, and in general, it was a fairly supportive reaction. But there was one very interesting comment, which was a gentleman from my school who commented on my post 5 times in a row, saying, call me. And I was like, okay, I have to know what this is about. So I sent him a message. I said, hey, Charlie, what's going on? And he jumped right in. He said, I'm very confused. And I said, okay, I get it. This is very new to a lot of people. I'm not going to judge you for that. Do you have maybe something you're confused about or a question I can answer? You know, help me help you. And he said, I just don't understand. How is your hair so short? I was like, wait, what? I get that a lot of this is very unfamiliar. That's fine. Do you know about haircuts, though? Because we've been doing that for a while. And he said, but it looks like a boy's hair. And I said, well, hey, thanks for noticing. Yeah, I paid for that. And he said, well, I think that's weird. Be who you were born. And I said, you know, in a roundabout sort of way, that's actually very supportive. Thank you. I was born this way. So ultimately we realized that he's trying to antagonize me, and I'm having way too much fun for that to work. And I'm trying to educate him, and he's too angry or scared or insecure or what have you for that to work. So we ended our conversation and went our separate ways. But I use that story to introduce literally every single presentation I give, whoever it's to, for a lot of reasons. The first reason I use that story is to show that I will try to answer any question. I don't care how you ask it. I don't care if it's not worded perfectly, it's a little too personal or a little too political. As long as you genuinely want to learn, I want to teach. My catchphrase is that the only question I won't answer is the question you don't ask. I genuinely mean that. We're going to get into some Q&A later. Whatever you're thinking about, like, oh, I don't know if I can ask about that. Ask about it. I want to talk about it. If you're thinking about it, somebody else is too. So I share that story to show that even Charlie, who was not being particularly nice in the way he asked his question, I hope none of you will be as mean as that, but I was trying to get through. You can ask anything you want, and I share that story to say that over the past 10 years of living in the world as a transgender person, dealing with all the trials and tribulations and outright hate and discrimination that can come along with that, the way I have dealt with all of that has been through humor. So you're correct in assuming that after 10 years, I'm absolutely hilarious. So we're gonna have a good time this afternoon. If you couldn't tell by now, I got my public speaking start in college theater and stand-up comedy. I'm like this all the time. My wife is a very special person for putting up. Okay, so on our next slide, we're gonna look at our agenda really briefly. Thank you. And if it's possible, I'd love to see the slides up there as well, so I know where I am. If it's not possible, that's okay. Whenever I talk about trans inclusion, I like to talk about 3 things. Nice and simple: what it means, why it matters, what you can do. We're going to go over the vocabulary to make sure we all have the language to be a part of this conversation. We're going to talk about why we're talking about this. Why are we talking about it in church? Why are we talking about it at this moment in time? Why are we talking about it in Missouri? Why do you specifically have to care about all this stuff, right? It seems like it's a pretty small group of people. And then we'll talk about what we can do. Once I've hopefully done a really good job getting everybody on board the allyship train, we'll talk about how we show up for one another with compassion and respect and curiosity. So, and then we'll go into Q&A. So let's jump into starting with language and vocabulary.
Just 1 second. I'm trying to get your slide.
Just 1 second. Oh, damn. How are we all doing so far? Great? Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Okay, close enough. There. So one of the things I really like to start with when we talk about language and vocabulary is this really fun infographic called the gender unicorn. If you want to go up.
Yes, just do, hum some hold music to yourself there.
You're doing your best. I'm just going to start talking about it. The gender unicorn, which we'll talk about the visual in a moment, basically helps us break down, and then, oh, there's a picture of it on your little piece of paper. That's excellent. Look at the piece of paper, and then we'll tell you when, you tell me when it's on the screen. So there are a couple of things on here. So the first, and the quote-unquote simplest, and I'll explain why I used air quotes in a second, is your biological sex. In short, that's how we talk about bodies. Genitals, chromosomes, hormone levels. It is assigned at birth based on what the doctor sees when you pop out, and there are a lot of assumptions that go along with that. So in general, when we talk about biological sex, we're talking about bodies. Next thing we have on there is your gender identity, which is your internal perception of being male, female, both, or something else entirely. In a minute, I'm going to explain a whole bunch of the gender identities that I just mentioned. But for right now, all we need to understand is that internal perception. That might feel like a new word for a lot of us, so I want to do a quick exercise. I want you to think about yourself. I want you to think about your body. Let's imagine that you were in some kind of accident where you needed to replace both of your legs with prosthetic legs. Would you still be the identity that you are, a man or a woman? Yeah, makes sense. All right, what if you were in a second accident and you then needed prosthetic arms additionally? Would you still be a man or a woman? Yeah, sure. All right, what if you were in a third accident and now you have a prosthetic lower half of your body? We'll imagine it's like far future, like 2035 or something. We can all be a head on a robot body. Are you still a man or a woman? Or whatever your identity is? Yeah, well, why? What part of you is man or woman? In your brain. That is your gender. Your perception of I know who I am. That's gender identity. Even if we haven't thought about it before. Understanding that regardless of how our bodies might look, how they might function, even if they might function in a way we don't want them to be functioning, you still have that sense of I know who I am. So that's gender identity. Next, we have your gender expression. That's the way you show that identity to the world. How do you act? How do you dress? How do you wear your hair? And there are a lot of categories we like to give to things. So this is for men and this is for women, but I don't always know how well that fits. Think of something like a skirt or a dress. Could anyone give me an actual reason why a skirt or a dress is seen as feminine? What about high heels? Those are really seen as very girly. Can anyone tell me why a high heel is feminine?
Most high heels are worn by women.
Because they're worn by women, sure. I can give you another good reason. I have no idea. It's just because that's the way we've always done things. High heels were invented for the manliest of men. I don't know if you know this. They were invented in France for horseback archers. The manlier you were, the higher your stiletto was. This is not a joke, because it meant that you could stand up on horseback and do a bow and arrow. So the better of an archer you were, the more of an intense stiletto you had. And the French nobility wanted to show that they were extra fancy, because then all of the citizens started wearing high heels to seem cool. And so they said only nobility are allowed to wear red stilettos. So all of the manliest French nobility men were all wearing red stilettos. It was the most masculine shoe you could wear. And then somewhere along the way we decided that it would be feminine. There's not a real actual reason. So I want us to remember that we're not always going to be able to make an easy connection to the way someone is dressing, to the way that they identify, their gender identity, their sex assigned at birth, or their sexual orientation. Because there's not an actual real reason that only women can paint their nails or only men can have short hair, right? We have these things that are the way we've always done things. But there's not a real reason. We just kind of decided as a society, okay, this probably can mean that, and that's fine. But I want us to start to recognize when we jump to those conclusions of, can you really be asking me to call you a boy and wearing that outfit? Is there an actual reason for that? Now, the last thing we have on here are your physical and emotional attractions. This is also known as your sexual orientation, your sexuality, as in short, the LGB, part of that broader LGBT acronym. Your sexual orientation refers to who you like, who you love, who you neither of the above. Someone might be asexual or aromantic, lots of different ways someone might identify. Sexual orientation and gender identity might connect to each other, but they are different. The easiest way to remember the difference is that sexual orientation is about our relationships to others, while gender identity is about our relationship to ourselves. Make sense? Awesome. Okay, let's keep moving on. We're going to talk really briefly about biological sex. Because I think a lot of our misunderstandings about gender identity come from our misunderstandings of biological sex. We think of it as a pure homogeneous binary, meaning that there are precisely two options. Someone is exactly male or exactly female. But the reality is, it's not quite so simple, right? Think of as many differences as you can, biologically, physiologically, between someone assigned male at birth and someone assigned female at birth. Now, do those differences show up in the exact same way for every single person you've ever met? I bet you're thinking, well, a lot of the time, sure, but I guess not every time. So if you go to the next slide, we can see that it is actually what we call bimodal. There are these probability clusters, basically things that are, on average, true between people assigned male at birth and people assigned female at birth. But it might not be true in the same way or for every person. So think of something like bone structure. On average, it's true. People assigned male at birth are often taller than people assigned female at birth. But I've seen the WNBA. I know that's not true every single time. Facial and body hair is also a really interesting one to bring in some additional layers of intersectionality when we talk about race and ethnicity. My family is Italian and Jewish, so in addition to loud and argumentative, that also means hairy. All of us, including the women. Most of the women in my family have fairly robust mustaches. Now, they bleach them, or they get them lasered, or they try to have them removed because people see them and associate them with being masculine. But do the women in my family all having coarser facial hair, does that make them men? No. That makes them like all 8 other Italian Jews. We're not a big group, but we're mighty. So recognizing that there are so many different ways the human body can show up, even with things like chromosomes. On average, it's true. People have either XX or XY. There are over 16 naturally occurring chromosome variations besides those two. There is a whole area in between what we call male and female called intersex that refers to people who have sex characteristics outside of those typical definitions. It might not be something you've heard about before, but it's just as common to be intersex as it is to be born with red hair. So if you've ever met a redhead, at some point statistically, you've met an intersex person too. All this is just to remind us that nothing is as simple as we want it to be. And I want us to hold on to that truth as we go into talking a little bit more about gender identity on the next slide. I have this analogy, I'm sure you're wondering what I've got going on with these chairs here. You're about to find out. I came up with this in high school as a way to explain to my peers what it meant to be transgender, because they were asking me all the time, and I had to figure out a good answer. So, we are going to imagine that for simplicity's sake, when everyone is born, they're born sitting either into a soft, squishy chair or a firm, tall stool. And this chair represents your biological sex. So we've all sat down before, right? When you first sit down, you feel the chair you're sitting in. You are aware of that chair. But if it's comfortable, you kind of stop feeling it. You're not constantly thinking about that chair. Now that I've pointed it out, you all probably feel your chair again. Sorry about that. But usually, we don't feel it. So this refers to someone who is called cisgender, which means having a gender identity that is the same as your biological sex. Not a bad thing, just a vocabulary word. Most of the people in this room probably identify as cisgender. Most of the people in the world do. Now, at some point, we've sat in a chair that's uncomfortable, right? Whatever the reason, it can be really distracting. The longer you go sitting in a chair that just doesn't feel right, the more it can become downright painful. So this feeling of discomfort or distress due to a mismatch between your biological sex and your gender identity is known as gender dysphoria, and it can be really challenging to deal with. Now, gender dysphoria is an emotion, so no two people, like any other emotion, are going to experience it in the same way. Someone might have it about different parts of their body or at different levels of intensity, but in general, it just means that my gender identity and my biological sex are not aligned. Now, there are lots of other reasons you might not be comfortable in the body you have. Gender dysphoria specifically is talking about that misalignment. Being cisgender doesn't have to mean you like every single thing about your chair. Certainly doesn't have to mean you like the way that your chair is treated by the other chairs. It just means I can sit in this chair and I feel okay about that. Now, there's another word we use in the trans community called gender euphoria that I really love that talks about a feeling of joy and comfort, feeling seen as we are by ourselves and others. For a long time, the way we talked about transgender people was only about misery. We are trapped in the wrong body. And that was really hard. It made me feel like everyone just thought of me as a really miserable person, which was challenging. A lot of our transition support was about how we get from a -10 to a 0. And I think that's great. I love not being at a -10 anymore. It's not fun over there. But a 0 is fine. Gender euphoria asks how we go from a 0 to a 10. So as an example of how this showed up for me, I had a lot of dysphoria about my chest. When I had top surgery in 2019 to make my chest appear more masculine, I stopped experiencing dysphoria. I felt very neutral in my body. It felt fine. A few years later, I decided to start hormone therapy, ergo, the beard, the deeper voice, the broader shoulders, not because I was miserable without it, but because I came to understand I could be even more joyful with it. That brought me gender euphoria. The best way I can explain my transition is that I have come home to my body for the first time. So, lots of people will experience these emotions in different ways, but I want to make sure we have the term. Now, if you're uncomfortable in the chair you're sitting in, what's the easiest solution? Move. Okay, now watch how crazy this is going to be. You'll notice two really important things about the way that I move my chair. One is that I'm not kicking over everybody else's stool because I don't like stools. I just want to be allowed to sit in a chair that's most comfortable for me. Whatever you might have heard, it is very important to me that you know that transgender people do not care about anyone else's chair. I am not the boogeyman, hiding under your bed, waiting to steal your pronouns when you fall asleep. I just want to be allowed to sit in the chair that makes me feel the most comfortable. I don't care what anybody else is doing. And the other thing to note is that I am the same person sitting in this squishy chair as I was sitting on this stool. I'm just more comfortable. When someone has a loved one come out, especially a child or a family member, they sometimes talk a lot about grief. My parents did too, and that was really hard for me. It was confusing because I thought I was the same person. I was just telling them a new fact about myself. But they told me it felt like someone had died. That was really heavy. I felt like I was alive for the first time. Like I had always been there just waiting for someone to see me. So it's really important to recognize that if somebody that you know and you love is moving their chair, some things might change. They might change their name or pronouns, they might go through medical, legal, or appearance changes, or they might not. There's no right or wrong way to move your chair. But at the end of the day, that person that you know and love is still very much alive. They're just more comfortable. So this refers to someone who is transgender, someone who moves from one chair to another, a gender identity that is different than their sex assigned at birth. But as some of us may have heard, there are a lot of other chairs people are sitting in. As it turns out, gender exists along a spectrum. There is a whole IKEA of chairs out there, just like biological sex. People can fall anywhere along that spectrum they want to. So maybe they want a chair that's a little softer than a stool, but a little taller than an armchair. Maybe they want to sit in one type of chair one day and a different type of chair a different day. Maybe they say, I just don't get it. No matter what chair I sit in, I'm uncomfortable. I'd rather just stand up. People can identify as gender fluid, agender, and a whole host of other identities that fall under this umbrella term, non-binary, which just means not one of the two binary identities, neither exactly male nor exactly female. Now, I used to pause at this point in the presentation and give a whole spiel about how do we stay up to date, how do we remember all of the different terms, all the different identities, but I reworked that section of the presentation when I realized that this is a skill that we already have. I think a lot about my wife because I'm obsessed with her. She's a pediatrician. She just started that job, and so she's really smart. So she goes to the hospital. She works a 14-hour shift. She comes home at the end of a long day. I say, hi, I missed you. How was your day? What did you do? And she opens her mouth, and I don't recognize any of those words. I have no idea what she's talking about. But I love her, so I engage. I am curious. I am enthusiastic. I am respectful. What she does not need is for me to go to medical school. What she does not need is for me to be a doctor, or for me to be a nurse, or for me to know every single thing that she's doing when she goes to the hospital. What she needs from me is to care. That's it. How many of us have friends or family members with hobbies that make no sense? Oh yeah. Or a coworker that has a highly technical job that makes no sense to you, or somebody who's really into newfangled gadgets. I have a friend who really likes death metal. I don't really get what's up with that. It's kind of hard to dance to, but I'm not going to be mean about it. I engage. I ask questions. That's the energy I want us to bring to the people in our lives with LGBTQ identities that might be unfamiliar to us. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to care. be enthusiastic, curious, and respectful. And understanding can come on day 100 as long as respect comes on day 1. You don't have to get every part of it or even any part of it to show kindness. And the more we ask questions, you'll be constantly surprised by how much you learn. So now we are going to switch gears. How are y'all feeling about language? Reasonably good? Okay. And we have those question cards as well, so if there was a specific identity you know you'd like me to define, definitely write that down, and when we get to the Q&A, I am happy to go over that as well. So now we're going to talk about current events and statistics. Yay, we love talking about current events. It's so fun. I want to start by talking about statistics and some statistical perceptions of the transgender and LGBTQ plus community. Because people say, man, this whole trend is maybe going a little bit too far. Feels like this is brand new, right? And we did that survey question at the beginning of when you met your first transgender person, and for a lot of people, it was recent. It feels really new. I get that. I want to talk about that data a little bit. I promise I'm going to read everything that this says because I know that the font is very tiny. So on the right side, we have our percentage of people identifying as LGBTQ+, sorted by generation. So we have our baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And on the left, we have the same percentages for transgender, non-binary specifically. So we can see that we've got kind of an upside-down pyramid situation going on with Gen Z being far more in the LGBTQ+ community than previous generations. Some people look at this and they say, that looks like a trend. It looks like it's becoming a much bigger thing this generation. I look at this graph and I spend a whole lot of time looking at the white space on here. I don't know about you, but I can think of at least one reason why so much of the bottom half of this pyramid did not answer yes to this survey conducted in 2023. The AIDS epidemic alone killed tens of millions of our LGBTQ+ elders, people who should have been here today to be that representation, to be that role model, to be that historian, and did not make it to today. It's not because they did not exist that they are not counted here. In addition to the people who didn't make it to today, think about, or as many of us might have lived, how it felt to realize something about yourself that at that time period in the world could have been a death sentence. Was it worth it to lose your family, your life, your dreams, your career, your health? Was it worth it? A lot of people, the answer was no. So they were in marriages that didn't feel right, or bodies that didn't feel like home, and then they got to a place where we're today, and they might feel like it's too late. And I want to be really clear for anybody who is feeling that way, it is never, ever too late to start living a life that feels authentic to you. Never too late. Even if you get a week as yourself, that's worth it. So there are a lot of people who weren't safe to come out because they were bullied, they didn't have family support, they still felt they might risk losing everything. The presence of stigma cannot be understated on how much that impacted whether or not someone could feel safe coming out. So what this is a graph of is not of occurrence of LGBTQ identity. This is a graph of survivalship, of safety, of visibility. What it reminds me of is a graph of left-handedness in the United States, which has a very similar kind of curve. Being left-handed used to be heavily punished in our schools, and when we realized we had bigger fish to fry, we saw a sharp rise, not in the number of people experiencing being left-handed, but in the number of people who were allowed to be publicly witnessed being left-handed. And then we saw a plateau when we found the naturally occurring proportion of left-handed people in the population. What we're seeing with the LGBTQ+ community, I firmly believe is something similar. It's not a trend, a fad, or a phenomenon, not something we'll be able to wait out. What we are seeing is healing. I get that this feels really new. I am not going to judge you for the fact that we live in a society that has largely hidden that information from us. But I promise that we've always been here. How many of us have ever read or watched Little Women? I love Little Women. How many of us know what I'm about to talk about? Louisa May Alcott, famous author of Little Women, regularly wrote letters. First, lived alone with a female roommate and best friend. Neither of them had any known romantic relationships. I wonder what was going on there. Regularly wrote letters to that same-sex roommate, talking about how he wished that he had been born a man, went by Lou Alcott socially and he, him pronouns, wrote letters constantly saying, every day I wake up and I cross my fingers that today is the day I finally woken up as a man. My body does not feel right, experiencing what we might now refer to as gender dysphoria. I can't assign the label transgender to Lou Alcott. It's not my place to do that historically. But what I can tell you is a 15-year-old kid sitting in an English class, reading Little Women, and feeling so completely, universally alone, feeling like I had invented the way I was feeling. If I had known that the author of the book I was reading had felt that way too, it would have saved me a lot of pain. So powerful to have those stories for young people to be able to see themselves. It wouldn't have made me trans, it would have made me safe. So I'd like to highlight there are so many historical figures we might not have heard anything about. Now I want to talk a little bit more about current events. Yeah, this one isn't fun. This is a map from the ACLU tracking anti-LGBTQ+ legislation across the United States. So this year there were over 527 anti-LGBTQ bills proposed across the United States, focused on everything from access to health care, to restrooms, to athletics, to the way that we dressed, to the places that we were allowed to work, to making it legal to discriminate. These bills are horrifying, and we don't have to get too far into the politics this afternoon or this evening, although if you would like to, put it on your question card and I'll go over it. But the biggest thing I want to highlight right now is the mental health impact of a map like this. I wear this map on my back like a bag of rocks at all times. I wear this map and I feel afraid. I feel alone. I feel attacked. I feel like I have a target on my back. And that is the intended goal of so many of these bills. We don't need to get into the specifics of the bills, but I'll give you an example that highlights how much the goal is fear. In 2023, Missouri had 8 separate anti-trans athletic bills proposed. 8 different bills focused on banning transgender athletes in the state. You want to know how many transgender athletes we had? 5. That is more than 1 bill per child. When we have the worst poverty rates in the nation, when so many of our rural schools are going down to 4 days a week, we have so many challenges facing the children in the state of Missouri. We had 5 children that we spent weeks bullying in the Missouri legislature, making specifically clear that they knew you are not welcome here. This map hurts. It's heavy. I want to know that this map also isn't the end of the world. Some of us look at this map and feel really frightened, especially those of us who are LGBTQ or have LGBTQ loved ones. And I want you to know that every bill proposed is not a bill passed. Missouri had 70 anti-LGBTQ+ bills proposed this year. Only 3 of them passed, and 1 of them we managed to take out all of the harmful language. That's amazing. In Florida, we managed to defeat every single anti-LGBTQ+ bill proposed by having humanizing conversations with state legislatures, calling them, going to speak with them, sitting down with them. That's amazing. This map is not the end of the world, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And more than anything else, what it creates is a culture where LGBTQ, and especially trans people, and especially transgender youth, can't afford to guess wrong. Everywhere I go, every person I meet, I am doing quick math in my head to figure out if I am safe. And if I have to guess, I can't afford to guess wrong. When I go to a speech, I open up a little mental file of every single person in this room. I know there's a lot of you here. I've been watching all of you to figure out, is there anybody here who I think might follow me in my car? Is there anybody here who I think might not be a safe person? Who might be here to heckle me or cause a problem? I have tracked every single person I've seen since the second I came, not just into the building, but onto the premises. Who saw me pull in? Who saw my license plate? I can't afford to guess wrong. And I want us to take a second. I'm going to ask us a challenging reflection question before we go into allyship. When somebody comes out as LGBTQ, especially transgender, and we realize that about ourselves, the first thing we do, once we're ready to tell others, is say, okay, well, who do I know has my back? Who's on my list? And we make a list of the people who have shown us that they will be supportive to LGBTQ+ people, whether that is through their allyship, through their clothing accessories, the pride flag, what have you. Who has shown us that we know, we do not have to guess. It's not just that they're a generally nice person. Who do we know has our back? I want you to take a second and think. If somebody in your life is making that list, are you on it? Or are we asking the people in our lives to guess? Because for them, it might mean that they can't afford to guess wrong. I don't tell you this to make you feel bad. I don't tell you this as a gotcha, you're a bad person. That is not what's going on here. What this is an opportunity for us to sit with something that might be a little uncomfortable and then give ourselves a challenge. The same challenge I issue to myself every day. What can I do to be 1% better tomorrow than I was today? That's your challenge for today. So we're thinking about how we can get on that list. There's your opportunity. 1% better tomorrow than we were today, which is 1% better than we were yesterday. Perfection will never be achievable. We can always keep growing. That's what it is, the project of being a human. But we can keep growing. So let's talk a little bit more about allyship and how we can keep growing. We're going to go into part 3. When I talk about allyship, I like to use 3 pillars to kind of categorize the different sections of allyship. So we have knowledge, language, and action. How are we expanding our understanding of the transgender community? How are we using the most respectful and inclusive language when we talk to and about transgender people? And then how are we showing up? Because you can use the right pronouns for me until you are blue in the face. I have bigger fish to fry than pronouns. So we'll talk about how we can show up a little more assertively as well. So let's start with our knowledge pillar. There are some stereotypes that exist about the transgender community. People are often surprised when I share that I'm transgender because they say, well, you don't look transgender. And I say, well, would you like to explain what that means? And they do not like to explain what that means. But usually it means that I don't have blue hair or piercings. The real reason I don't have piercings is because I'm a big baby. I'm very afraid of needles. My hair isn't blue because it's really hard to dye brown hair. Well, curly hair. My curls are so good, I can't bleach them. They're so cute. Does that make me a better trans person because I'm not fitting into that stereotype? No, absolutely not. So what a stereotype is at its core is a story. Is hearing one story over and over again about a certain group of people, and then when you meet a real person, you start telling yourself that story again. Which means that one of the best ways to overcome stereotypes is through stories. Read a book about a transgender historical figure or a trans romance story. Watch a documentary like Will and Harper, which is one of my favorite documentaries of all time. Will Ferrell and Harper Steele, 2 SNL writers and comedians. She transitioned later in life and they go on a road trip across the country. It is hilarious, it's heartfelt, it talks about allyship. I love Will and Harper. So hear stories that break the mold. Read about stories of transgender people of color, transgender women, transgender people with disabilities. Understanding that there is no community where there are not transgender people. There are transgender religious people, transgender people of all ages. There is no part of the country that does not have transgender people in it. Find those stories to break that stereotype. The other thing I really want us to do is break our vision of transgender people as just a really one-dimensionally sad group of people. People expect me to be really angry and miserable all the time. There's a lot of scary stuff happening out there. I get it. But they hear that I'm transgender and they say, oh, that must be really sad for you. You need a hug. I'll always take a hug, but they're very surprised when they meet me, and I'm like a dog. I'm just so excited to be anywhere all the time. I love meeting new people. I am like the happiest person I know. Now that's a choice that I make every single day. I'm not happy because I'm naive. I'm not happy because I have my head in the sand. We're in Missouri, we don't have any sand left. I have nowhere I can bury my head. I'm joyful because every single day I wake up and I choose to do that. I choose to find community, I choose to find rest, I choose to be intentional with my news intake, I choose to be joyful every day. And lots of transgender people are doing that. Being transgender does not mean having a bad life. If you have a loved one who's coming out as transgender, or if you yourself are figuring out what that journey looks like, there is so much joy to be found in these identities. I want you to support me because you love me. I want you to support me because you understand it builds a better world for all of us, but I don't need pity. I'm not here to be pitied. I'm here to walk with you. So that's our knowledge category. Next one is our language category. Pronouns, we gotta talk about them. I wish we could be done with pronouns, but we are still moving along with them. We all have pronouns. Transgender people did not invent pronouns. If you have ever used words like he, she, as well as words like I, me, or we, congratulations, you have a pronoun. We all have them. Transgender people just normalized sharing them by means of introduction. I share my name because I want you to use it. I share my pronouns just like I share my name. There's not anything weird about it. Whenever somebody shares their pronouns with me, immediately they go on the list of safe people. I know, okay, this is a person who's got my back. If somebody doesn't share their pronouns, it doesn't mean that I'm immediately like, okay, cool, they hate me. I'm not going all the way there, but it means the jury's still out. I don't know exactly what they've got going on. So we want to make sure we're using the correct pronouns for transgender people. And if you make a mistake, don't freak out. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's just been so hard. You'll always be my little girl. I'm trying my best. And now I'm crying and I need a tissue. And that's a lot. And we're going to slow down. Because now I'm like, okay, well, I'm so sorry I put you through this. So now I feel like I have to apologize for existing. And the fact that me existing makes this person keep crying. Especially for a kid. I was 15, I don't know how to handle that. I wasn't emotionally mature enough for those conversations. So if we make a mistake, don't freak out. Apologize, correct yourself, and move on. Oh yeah, well as he was saying, so sorry, she. Keep going along. Sometimes people use pronouns other than he or she, they being the most common. The singular they, I know might feel really new and unfamiliar to a lot of us, but it actually probably isn't. If you walked into a coffee shop and someone left a water bottle on the table, would you say someone dropped his or her water bottle if you've seen him or her, let him or her know? No, people would laugh at you. You'd sound very funny. You'd say, hey, someone dropped their water bottle. You see them, let them know. Right? We use they all the time when we don't know what the person looks like. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't feel like a new muscle. It's okay for it to be unfamiliar to use they as a singular pronoun. It doesn't make you a bad person. We can practice. Go to the park and use singular they for every squirrel that you see or every driver that cuts you off on 170. Say, oh, they're so cute. I wonder what they're doing. They are not driving with the flow of traffic. They do not know what's going on. There is so much duct tape on their car. However you want to use they. Just pick one entity and practice using they for a singular entity. It's okay that it feels new, but it being new isn't an excuse forever. At some point, it's not actually new anymore. We're just not trying to learn it, right? We're learning how to use phones. We're learning what my sister means when she says I have Skibbity Ohio Riz. We learn, even if we don't really like it, we learn. Singular they might be new, might be unfamiliar, might not be what you learned in school. That's okay. Things are changing. So we practice, we give ourselves grace, we make that effort, and people will notice. Even if you're not getting it right perfectly, people in my life who use they, them pronouns, who can see that someone is trying to learn, I have infinite patience for the people who are genuinely trying, or making an effort. So if you get somebody's pronouns wrong, use the right ones 3 times fast in a sentence. Helps you just build that muscle memory. Practice. The other thing is asking respectful questions. When I came out, people started asking me everything. They assumed I was an expert, which was very funny because I was 15 and had come out 5 seconds ago. They made this assumption that I came out and then RuPaul came down my chimney and said, okay, here's the encyclopedia of gay, slay queen. That didn't happen because that's home invasion and RuPaul has bigger fish to fry. So I wasn't an expert at all. I was just some 15-year-old, but everyone assumed that me coming out automatically made me an expert. I am an expert on this because I am a scholar of transgender inclusion. I have studied this, I have published books on this, I have researched this. Has been my career for over a decade. Not every person wants to tattoo their forehead to say, ask me anything, yes, really. I'm like that. Not every transgender person is. So if there's a specific person you want to ask a question to, give them a little prefix. Hey, do you mind if I ask you a question about something? Do you have energy for me to ask you something right now? Not everyone has the emotional energy to share a big personal story of their coming out or knows exactly what the difference is between pansexual and bisexual. You know, not everyone is that expert. So ask something. Do you mind if I ask you a question about something? Our last category of allyship is going to be action, our final pillars. There are a couple of quick actions I want to highlight. The first is to make sure that we are staying informed about the state of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation. Obviously, we want to find the right balance between staying informed and staying sane. And if you want me to talk about how to balance watching the news lately, you can ask about that in the Q&A. I've got a whole soapbox about it. But making sure that we understand what's impacting our LGBTQ+ loved ones is critical, both for being able to provide them support, to say, hey, I imagine this has been a challenging day. How can I help you? As well as knowing where we might be able to show up as allies. So Promo, for example, is an organization right here in Missouri that leads a lot of our LGBTQ inclusion efforts. They're a phenomenal organization, and right now they're looking for people to deep canvas, just to go and knock on doors and talk to people. They'll give you all the training, they'll give you a script, they'll give you stories to tell, resources, and where you're going to go, and they'll just help you have conversations to say, hey, can I tell you a story about a friend of mine who's transgender? Have you ever met a transgender person before? It's not a political conversation, it's a human conversation. Maybe that sounds like totally not your speed, so figure out what is. If you want to get more involved, think about what am I good at, what needs doing, and what brings me joy. For me, it's storytelling. I love getting up on a stage, telling a story, talking about myself. I know that makes a difference, so I have found and activated my superpower as an advocate. What are you best at? Fundraising, is it communications, is it emotional support, is it baking? When I go to the capital of Jefferson City and somebody shows up with brownies, I am at least 10% less miserable to be there than I otherwise would have been. It's not a good time, but the brownies help. So what are you good at? How can you put that towards making a difference? And then the last thing is to stand up when you hear somebody say something that is unkind, that is hurtful, that is aggressively anti-trans. It doesn't always have to be, I can't believe you said that. It could be, wow, I'm surprised to hear you mention that. Can you tell me more about that? Help me understand what you know about this topic. Just asking questions to start those conversations, because change moves at the speed of trust. And if somebody already trusts you, they are so much more likely to want to hear it from you. To want to hear, well, did you know that I met somebody who was transgender at an event I went to at my church, and it was actually really cool. Here's something that I learned. Those relationships are where so much of change is made. People say, Ben, I get nervous. I don't want to stir the pot. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Can't we just agree to disagree? Can't we just stay quiet about it? And you can, but I'll tell you one of my favorite quotes that says, if you're trying to be my ally and the stones thrown at me aren't hitting you, you aren't standing close enough. At some point, real, meaningful allyship is not going to make us universally well-loved. There will be people who see you try to include me and say, wait, we didn't want him in here. You can't include him. You get to decide how important that person's opinion of you is. I can't draw that line for you, but I know for me, the allies in my life that I remember and cherish the most are the ones who are willing to get hit by a few stones, because I never get to turn that off. I am made political against my will. I don't want to be politics. I just want to be a human. I don't get that choice. So it's okay to stir the pot a little bit, to stand up, to be willing to take a risk. That means something. So I'm going to share one more story, and then we're going to go into the Q&A section of our event about the first time I met a transgender adult. I want to get a little more human to human, talk about why I do this work, why it's so important for me to be so open and honest and vulnerable in everything that I do. When I was coming out, there were not transgender people around me, and certainly not transgender adults, and absolutely not happy ones. Which meant that it did not occur to me that I would grow up, because I had never seen it before. Not on my TV shows, no happily ever afters, no transgender people with cool jobs I can envision myself in. So when my friends talked about going off to college or growing up or starting families, I was supportive, but I knew that those conversations weren't meant for me. I just played pretend. And then, the summer after my freshman year of college, I went to see an off-Broadway play with my dad that featured a trans actor playing a trans character as a romantic lead with a happy ending. He had some gray hair and a beard, and my mind was blown. I had never seen anything like it before. And I spent the whole show sitting in my seat, planning out everything I was going to say to him after the show. I was going to say, Ian, I've never seen someone like myself represented on a stage before. It gives me so much hope for myself and for my future as a transgender man. Thank you. We were going to take a picture. He'd sign my playbill. It was going to be perfect. I had it all planned out. We came into this lobby room after. I'm on one side. He's on the other. I take one look at him. I'm ready to give my spiel. I open my mouth, and I burst into tears. I could not get a word out. He sees me from across the room. He walks through the whole crowd. He comes right up to me, and he just grabs me. And he starts crying, and we stand there, crying in each other's arms, not saying a word, but understanding everything we needed to know about each other. And after 2 or 3 minutes, he stepped back and he said, this is it. This is why representation matters. And he told me how he had had the exact same thing happen to him 20 years before, the first time he saw a transgender person on stage, and the difference that that made for him. And in that moment, I said, okay, that's it for me. Everything I'm going to do from this moment onwards is the goal of being that for as many people as possible. Being the reason somebody gets to look at me and say, oh, I can be trans and grow up and find love and find success and find joy. And everything I do is to the goal of fighting for a world where that is true for as many people as possible. And I know I won't be able to build that world on my own, but I gotta tell you, I am not doing it on my own. I know how it feels. I know how it feels when you watch the news, when you look at social media. It feels like everybody has picked a side, and we are just getting angrier and more divided and more hateful. But I gotta tell you, when I am out there in the world, that is not how it looks. When I'm out there at over 150 PFLAG meetings, when we are in overfull rooms in libraries in rural Iowa and a church basement in rural Georgia, that we held the event in secret because there were too many active militia groups to advertise, but we packed the room with families who drove in on their tractors. When I'm doing events in rural North Carolina for a group of older ladies and Indivisible who said, we've never met a transgender person before, but it is about time we start. When I'm doing events, webinars in Russia, where parents join under pseudonyms because they don't want to get caught supporting their trans kids, but are willing to take that risk to know how to make their homes a little more joyful for those kids. Everywhere I go, I am meeting people who are so committed to building a world where that joy is possible for as many people as we possibly can. I know that I am not doing this work alone. I feel confident in every ounce of my being that a better world is possible. It is out there and that we are already fighting to build it. I know that we will not get there by accident. We will not get there by default. We will not get there by waiting around for someone else to step in and build it, but we will get there on purpose. What I see when I look out at rooms like this that are full of people who came in ready to learn, ready to ask questions. I don't know where you started from, but you're here. You listened. You were a part of this. This is purpose. This is how I know we're going to get to that world. You all give me yet another reason to be hopeful. So thank you all for giving me that hope and for giving me your attention and your open hearts and your open minds. And we'll go into the Q&A, but just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much. So we are now going to get ready to collect your Q&A cards. Feel free to write whatever question you have. And again, you can ask me about anything you want to. Write those questions down, put them on the cards, and then we will get that going. Get those questions done. There's nothing you can't ask me. And then we'll get the show on the road. While we're waiting for questions, unless you have one already, do you want to put, I have a resources slide, if you want to put that up on the screen. Does somebody by the computer want to hit the next slide button? No, that's good. Okay, while we're doing questions, and once you've got your question already submitted, I have this beautiful slide behind me that has my contact information, my website, a free newsletter I do called Good Queer News that just talks about how on earth we can be hopeful right now. So feel free to scan that QR code just like we did with the first one if you would like some additional resources. And now we are ready for question time. I'm going to sit down. Wow, I love this.
Oh, here we go. Make sure you're comfortable.
Oh yeah, I'll do a comfortable chair. That's right. I love it.
How should I respond when someone comes out to me? What should I say?
What should I say when someone comes out to me? So the biggest thing to note is that when someone comes out to you, right, I've talked all about how scary it is to come out. When I realized I was trans, I waited 8 months to come out to anybody. I had 4 people that knew I was transgender for the first 8 months of my transition. When someone decides to come out to you, that's a huge deal. That is a gift that that person is giving you. And you should be proud of yourself that you are a safe enough person that they felt comfortable enough to come out to you. That's amazing. So first recognize the beauty of that moment. Something really special, really personal gift that you are being trusted with, and a really special thing about yourself that made you worthy of that. That's amazing. So the first thing I do when someone comes out to me is I thank them. I recognize how scary it is to figure out whether or not I'm a safe person and how much energy it can take to have that conversation. So I'll say thank you so much for telling me. And then I'll ask directly, what does it look like for you right now for me to be a good ally and a good friend? And especially if this is someone like a child or a loved one, we also want to make sure it is explicitly clear that we have their back. So when I came out to my parents, just 10 years ago, they had no idea how to respond, but they said, we don't really know what that means, but we love you, and we'll figure it out together. You don't have to get everything right. You You probably won't, because we're all humans, we're all just doing our best. It's a very emotional moment. So just say, thank you, I'm so glad you told me. I want you to know that I love you. Really specific. We do not want to make them guess. I am right here with you. I see you, I support you, I love you. I still love you. So important. And then just ask him, what does it look like right now for me to be a good ally? How can I be a good friend? How can I be a good sister? How can I be a good parent? What does love look like for you right now? And then we follow their lead, because I don't know what they need. I don't know what they're afraid of. I don't know what challenges they're facing, but they do. So we'll ask them what they need. It's a great question.
Why isn't having gender-neutral restrooms enough? Why do trans girls need to be able to use girls' restrooms at schools?
So often the way that it works logistically when we have a gender-neutral restroom, my school had a gender-neutral restroom, and it was a big school. It was very spread out. So that meant that if it was between classes, especially when it was like you could use the bathroom in the nurse's office, was that I would often be late to my classes. I would have to run to the bathroom that was way all the way across the school that I felt really uncomfortable doing, or I would be late to classes and then I'd get in trouble. So it mostly meant that I didn't drink water or I would hold it all day. So UTIs are really common among the trans community because we hold it, because we don't feel safe. People get really nervous about trans girls and girls' restrooms, so I also really want to highlight there is not even anecdotally evidence of transgender girls having access to restrooms making cisgender girls less safe. There are so many things that make cisgender girls unsafe. Transgender girls are not one of them. And in fact, transgender people are so much more likely to be assaulted trying to use the bathroom than they are to assault someone. If another student wants to find a way to assault a female student, we've seen rampant sexual assault on college campuses, by fraternities, by athletes. 1 in 4 women are sexually assaulted on a college campus. That's not transgender girls. That's not the problem, and the people doing it are not facing accountability. So I want to recognize that it's a misdirected urge that people have to protect girls. I want to protect girls too, all of them, from the actual threats they are facing. So gender-neutral bathrooms, just architecturally, we don't have enough of them. If a kid only has one bathroom they can access, and the nurse goes to lunch, and oh well, guess you can't pee for the next hour, it's not a safe or tenable solution. Trans girls just want to be allowed to pee. Why don't we have stalls that close all the way? That would solve a lot of problems for everybody. Why can't we just have actually private bathroom stalls? I think that would be great. So we just want to be allowed to exist like normal. Transgender girls have no nefarious plot to get in the bathroom. They want to be allowed to pee.
So transgender is not considered gay?
That is a great question. So they are different. Someone could be both transgender and gay. Gay specifically refers to sexual orientation, which is, okay, I am attracted to someone of a different identity. Transgender has nothing to do with who I date or how I date them. That is an entirely personal thing. It would be harder to be gay on a desert island than transgender on a desert island, if that makes sense, I think. So transgender is just my personal identity, and gay would be my orientation. So my orientation personally is kind of queer. I haven't figured out exactly what it is. Basically, there's at least one elected official who's very mad about the way that I date other people, but I don't have a specific word for that. I'm married to a woman, so some people might look at that as a straight relationship. But yeah, sexual orientation and gender identity are separate things.
Excellent segue. When did the word queer become acceptable?
Yes, this is a very good question, and it really depends on who you ask. The word queer for a very long time, well, first for a long time it was used just to mean funny and strange, right? There are lots of old-timey books that say something very queer is going on here. I like those a lot, I think they're funny. So they just meant something strange, something devious and mischievous. Then it started to be used as a slur. People would say things like smear the queer, or really terrible, hateful phrases, especially in schools, but also in broader society. It was used in a way that was very hateful. Some people right away said we were going to take that word's power back. We will say in a protest chant, especially in the ACT UP and AIDS epidemic era of activism, we're here, we're queer, we won't disappear. So all of a sudden someone would say, well, you queer, and someone would say, well, sure, I am. That's not hurtful to me. I've taken the power back from that word. Not everyone has chosen to do that. Some people say that's a word that has a lot of pain for me. I'd rather just use a word that at no point was used, or especially personally, to hurt me. So people in Gen Z are much bigger fans of that word, in part because it had already exited out of being a slur by the time most Gen Z people were coming of age, and also because it's more nebulous. Some people in Gen Z and other generations just are not entirely sure what label fits, and they don't really care about finding the specificity. They just like that queer means different than the normal. Outside of the norm, I love in a way that is unique, in a way that is different than the norm. I love people that are different from the norm. So there are lots of different relationships people will have with the words. Some people still really do not like queer. There's no wrong answer for how someone feels about it. As long as you don't use it with an intent to be hurtful, I would say it's probably okay.
So if you didn't know any trans people when you were growing up, how did you know you were trans?
Yeah, so that took a while, and for a while I didn't. For a while I just knew I was miserable. My body started to change with puberty, and I knew that I hated it. But the way that we talk about puberty with kids is, oh, puberty's terrible, everybody hates puberty. My middle school, all the adults called it puberty jail. People hated puberty, or at least I thought. So I knew that I was miserable. I knew that I was depressed. I knew that I was fairly actively suicidal because all these changes were happening and they felt so wrong. But everyone said puberty is horrible, so I assumed that all of my peers were desperate to make everything stop. It wasn't until years later that I happened to see a Facebook post from someone saying, I'm transgender and here's how I knew, here's what that means, that I had this moment of like a wave crashing over me where everything made sense. I saw that post and I said, oh my God, I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know that was allowed. And then I did as much research as I could, which wasn't much, there wasn't that much out there, but I searched for everything that I could try to find. And that's another misconception it's really important we kind of overcome. Learning the word transgender did not make me transgender. It gave me the final key to unlock something that had been really trapped in me in a way that was very painful for a long time. But I didn't get turned transgender by hearing that word. It just gave me the language to talk about what I was already struggling with.
Did you go through a period of discomfort when you started male hormones?
It's a good question. Well, I did kind of go through menopause and puberty at the same time, which was bad. That wasn't fun. It was a lot of voice cracks, a lot of sweating. So some of it was not comfortable, but most of it, there's a term that one of my friends came up with that's euphoria. So euphoria with a W instead of a U. It's basically like, ew, it's so gross how sweaty I am. Oh my gosh, it's working. That's so exciting. It's disgusting, but how exciting. And so honestly, no, it was really awesome. Some people are like, you know, there's a lot of acne in the beginning. That was terrible, and the sweating was not fun. But it was still like, okay, I am kind of being born into myself right now. I'm coming home, and it might have some growing pains, but even the uncomfortable parts where I was just over the moon that I finally was coming home.
Do you have a penis?
That is an excellent question. I personally don't. So we have, in general, we call our surgeries top surgery and bottom surgery are the most common. Top surgery is chest, bottom surgery is genitals. Bottom surgery for people who are assigned male at birth has existed for a really long time. So to go from a penis to a vagina has existed in like fairly good fashion for a long time. Institute for Sexual Medicine was doing them, and they've been generally fairly comfortable, fairly functional. This surgery going the other direction from vagina to penis is much less well developed right now. It is a lot more painful, there's a lot higher risk for complications. It's also harder to add skin than it is to take it away. So we won't get too like graphically medical, but there's a lot more scarring and it hurts a lot more, and I'm a big baby. So I personally don't have that because the surgery is not currently good enough to feel worth it, and because I feel really comfortable in my body right now. I don't actually feel miserable not having that. So that might change at some point if the surgery, you know, they continue to research it, they continue to develop it, that might get very different at a different point in time, but as of now, I don't.
How did your point of view on the patriarchy change as you transitioned?
This is a really good question. I became aware of a lot of things as I transitioned and started to become more masculine in particular. I spent the first 15 years growing up as a girl, which means that there are certain things that women know to teach their daughters. Walking home with my keys in between my fingers, and if you get on a train late at night and you find another woman and sit next to her, I understood all of these things to be true. I learned all the ways that women keep each other safe from the general threat that was men. And I learned about that, and that was totally ingrained into, it was muscle memory. And then I remember I had started testosterone, and I was seeing a Broadway show in New York City, and I was taking a late train back to see my parents. And I had the muscle memory. I got on the train, and I said, okay, I have to find a woman, and I have to sit next to her. Uh-oh. All of a sudden, I have a beard, and I see a woman reading a book, and I was like, God, that's so perfect. And I went over, I sat right down next to her in this empty train car, and I said, hi, what are you reading? And I felt her like, and I had this moment of like, oh my God. Oh no, I'm the bad guy now. Uh-oh. And it was really challenging for me to recognize that. And it was helpful for me to get that perspective of like, did I become a worse person? No. Did I become a danger to women inherently? No. Did I become someone who could not be presumed safe? Yes. So there are things that I will do differently. I won't sit on a woman, on a train late at night when the rest of the train car is empty. If I'm in a parking garage in my car late at night and a woman is walking back by herself, I will wait in my car until she is inside because I know that she's not going to feel safe with me walking behind her because neither would I. That was what I learned, that that's not a safe situation. And if I yell out, don't worry, I'm safe, that's going to also make it worse. That's not going to go well. So I also learned, I learned that I need to be proactive about keeping the women around me safe. I've learned that people certainly trust my expertise a lot more than they did before I was a man. People think I'm a lot smarter now than they did then. I've also learned that the patriarchy hurts men too. It is isolating. My friends don't ask about my mental health nearly as much as they used to. People are much more surprised when I say things like, I love you, or I talk about how excited I am. The patriarchy is isolating for men. We talk about the male loneliness epidemic, and in many ways that's true. In some ways it's self-fulfilling, and a lot of my male friends are really afraid to talk about their feelings, but it is really interesting to see how that's shown up. In a women's room, it's like the most supportive party of all time. Oh my God, I love your dress, can we do each other's makeup? In a men's room, if you make eye contact with someone, you're not supposed to do that. It's not that kind of party environment. It's much more, cut off. So I've definitely learned a lot of things about the patriarchy. I have become an even stauncher feminist, in part because I'm not like 15 anymore, so I kind of know more stuff that's going on, but also because I understand the ways that the patriarchy is not actually really good for any of us.
What advice would you give a queer teen to help them find supportive, safe friends?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, so how do you find supportive friends and community? Well, here in St. Louis, there's an amazing organization called Proud Art St. Louis. It is awesome. It is a queer youth arts organization. They do meetups multiple times a month where they do art projects and they meet different queer adults and do cool things. We love Proud Art St. Louis, and there are a lot of amazing groups like that. So really what I try to do is find one person and I ask them who they're connected to. So I'll go to a group like Proud Art and say, hey, well, I live all the way out over here in St. Charles, or I live in this small town. Do you know anybody there? I'll look for groups like PFLAG chapters where I can meet parents of LGBTQ youth who might have a kid they could introduce me to. If I'm a kid, if you're trying to be kids as an adult, maybe don't do that. But as a kid, you could attend an organization like PFLAG or Proud Art, some of those gatherings. Social media can be safe, but we really want to make sure we're checking if someone actually is a kid. There are a lot of people who are not always having the best intentions on social media, trying to help teenagers meet each other. Events like Tower Grove Pride that just happened in the park, those are amazing. And finding things that you're passionate about, and then hopefully there will be some intersection there, whether it is a board game club, or a nature group, or a hiking club. What are the other things you're passionate about? And then you can build relationships about those things that are shared, while you also figure out, okay, what other things do we have in common? Are you also a safe person? It can be challenging. Sometimes visibility is the answer. That when I came out, all of a sudden I had all these queer friends, because then they knew they could come to me. So hopefully us being visible can open those doors, or finding the other visible people who are out there already. Don't be afraid to ask somebody to be your friend. I still do that as an adult. I go up to other adults and I'm like, hey, I would like to be your friend. Would you like to be my friend? Okay, great, now let's hold hands. I don't actually do like that anymore. But I do say like, cool, you want to have dinner? You want to play a board game? What do you want to do?
Oh, it's that.
Ask somebody to be your friend. It's okay. It's a little corny, but it works. So do it.
It comes out,
Do the
right?
hormones
Does it
that
come out of the
help
wall?
a person transition have to be taken throughout their life?
Yes, generally. I will give the short version. If you want the really long medical answer, I can give it to you later. For transgender men and people who are on testosterone, which is not always someone who's a transgender man, they might be non-binary, but if you're on testosterone, yes, you do have to be on that forever. If you are on estrogen, you can get an implant, like a birth control implant, and so you don't have to be actively taking the medicine. It just is in there in your body, and every like 6 months to a year, you might have to get that replaced. At some point I could stop and my body would go back to producing estrogen. For me, that's not something I want to do right now, so some effects will stay. The beard, I'll have the beard forever unless I wanted to get electrolysis and have that removed. My voice will be deeper forever. Once your voice deepens, it can be challenging to get it to get a little bit higher. So I could stop. I will most likely be on them forever. Most people are, but some people aren't too, and that's okay. Especially as people get older, I might decrease the amount of testosterone in my dose so that I am naturally aging along with other people the same age range as me.
Why does North Carolina have 0 anti-trans bills while it's surrounded by states that have lots of such bills? And how can we use that in Missouri?
Yeah.
Can you click back to his map slides?
I would love to
Just
go
hit
back.
the left arrow. Yeah, just keep
Yeah.
going.
Okay, cool. There we go. North Carolina has 0. I believe they were not in session this year. I think that's the reason. They didn't have any bills this year.
So we have to prevent Missouri from going back into legislative session.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Some legislative sessions, like Texas, is every other year. So Texas won't have another legislative session until 2026. So they get a little bit of extra time to breathe. We can't really stop the bills from being filed. What we can do is engage with the bills that are actual threats. That's why an organization like Promo is so helpful, because we had over 70 bills that were filed, pretty much all of them, right at the beginning. People were like, oh my God, they were so freaked out. So when we said, hey, we need people to come for this bill, they would say, I'm just so overwhelmed, there's so many of them. But in actuality, there were about 4 bills we were genuinely really worried about in Missouri. But people were so pre-defeated by the 70, we couldn't get them to show up for the 4. And that was the goal, that people didn't know how big the actual threat was, and so they just gave up. So engaging with organizations like Promo, who can let you know, hey, this is where our real concern is. This is where our fear is. This is where we need bodies. We need people, we need stories, we need testimony. Engaging with those organizations that we trust, not just to try to fearmonger us about how many bills there are, but to say where does the actual work need to get done is super, super important.
How do we have dialogue with the religious community?
Yeah. People assume that LGBTQ and religion are the opposite ends of the spectrum. That is not true at all. I think as evidenced by how full this room is, clearly that is not true. I actually became more religious after I came out, for a variety of reasons. Partially because of the support I received from my synagogue and how passionately I saw them show up as allies, but partially because my transition was a spiritual journey for me. There's a quote that I really love, and some of you may have heard this before. It says, God made me transgender for the same reason he made grapes instead of wine and wheat instead of bread, so that humanity could share in the divine magic of creation. I love that quote. I don't feel like God made a mistake in making me. The things I have learned, the kind of man I have become, the experiences I've had, I don't regret any of it. I'm so glad I got to be on this journey, and it feels incredibly divine to have done so. So when I'm talking to somebody about LGBTQ and faith, I'll share my personal story of how I decided to become both an ally and going through my own transition journey. I'm not going to try to debate scripture with somebody, because we have this fun thing in our brains called confirmation bias. You can find evidence of whatever you decide to look for. If someone decides they would like to be hateful, they decide they would like to exclude, you can find evidence in scripture that tells you to do so. I can't say that there are no exclusive or hateful or misconstruable passages in any religious texts, right? They exist. They're in there. So if somebody decides they want to be hateful, they can look to their text to find a reason to be hateful. But if someone decides they want to be loving, they can look to their text to find love thy neighbor, to find passages in any religious text. You can find passages that tell you to love someone no matter what. So I tell people I can't make that choice for you. I won't debate scripture because I've got stuff and you've got stuff. What I can tell you is that you get to choose to look for the sword or to look for the shield. They're both in there. I can't pick for you. I hope you pick the shield. Sit down with people, talk about my journey. I see them as a human. I don't see someone as a cruel, one-dimensional villain. There's a quote I really love that says, "We cannot deny each other the dignity of complexity." Someone who is using their faith to be cruel to me is not a supervillain. They're not the worst person who has ever lived. They are not exclusively a hateful person. They were raised in a way that was very different from me. They have a lot of pain that's very different from my pain, but is still real pain. I have to see that person as an entire human being, hear where they're coming from, hear where they're hurting. And only once I have been prepared to see them in their humanity can we start to have a conversation that's actually going to go anywhere. Because we sit down from each other, just like I can tell when somebody thinks that I am a villain for the work that I do as a trans advocate, they can tell when I think that they are just some Bible-thumping bigot. That conversation is not going anywhere. Until we can see each other as complex human beings, we can't go anywhere. So I will sit down with them. I will find out where they're starting. I will find out what they are carrying, what they are holding, and I will hope that they'll choose to pick up the shield. But I can't make that choice for them.
Some of us have had experiences or upbringings that cause us to feel uncomfortable when we encounter someone that we perceive to be trans. What advice would you give for us to sort of work through that, relearn, reconfigure our feelings?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of things many of us were raised to do that aren't necessarily the case anymore, right? For example, we all use the same water fountain. We don't have those divided bathrooms and water fountains anymore. A lot of people were raised to be afraid of people of a certain race, or of a certain religion, or of a certain gender identity, like transgender people. The world changes in a lot of ways, and I would encourage you to, A, remind yourself that there are lots of ways that you have changed as the world around you has changed. Things that we've gotten more comfortable with. Self-driving cars, that's still a good one for me. I don't trust a self-driving car. That's suspicious. Self-driving cars we get more comfortable with. Many of us met people with disabilities for the first time later in life. We're learning to be more empathetic for people with developmental disabilities or people from different faith traditions. Remind yourself of the other moments in your life where you acknowledged something might be different. Give yourself some grace as you're learning, but also make sure you notice those feelings, right? Most of our brain is working on an unconscious level to keep us running. We are largely autonomous creatures. Very little of our actual thought is conscious thought. It's all happening automatically. So if I notice I'm having a reaction, if I notice I'm having ooh, I don't trust that person, ooh, I'm afraid of that person, I stop and I say, okay, pump the brakes, why not? What is my evidence? What do I have? And when I force myself to slow down, I can notice, okay, well that might be coming from a place of bias. It might be coming from an experience that I had that has nothing to do with that person. So pumping the brakes when we notice those reactions, and that storytelling one is going to be really big as well. The more stories we hear of LGBTQ plus people, and the more we can meet transgender people and see them as friends and community members, it's much easier to feel afraid when I'm not a person. When I am an agenda, when I am a concept, when I am a guy that they talk about on the news, it's easy to feel afraid when you don't know me. When you have a trans friend, when you have a trans neighbor, when you have a trans congregant, when you have a trans podcaster or trans author, when all of a sudden we're just the people that you're sharing the planet with, it'll get a little easier. It'll take practice. But practice is a verb. It does not mean waiting and assuming that it will just get better on its own. It's amazing to be able to acknowledge, hey, the way I was raised, I don't know how equipped I am. That's okay, but it's not an excuse to stay unequipped. It's amazing to recognize that. And then we say, okay, now what am I going to do about it? How am I going to learn more? How am I going to make a trans friend? So go to a P-Flag meeting, or find spaces in person where you might make a trans friend. We're nice. We don't fight, generally speaking. I can't speak for everyone. But we're friendly. So make some friends, hear some stories. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more.
Awesome.
Where can I get more resources to share with my family to help them understand non-binary people and trans people?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. So there are a couple of categories of resources I might recommend. We want to have educational resources, we want to have some support resources, and we want to have some personal resources. So our educational resources are our general definitions. So do we have websites where somebody has done a really good job explaining what it means to be non-binary? PFLAG, for example, nationally has a glossary of terms on their website. It is super robust, very well written, and just has definitions for like everything you can think of. So that can be a great way to start. We also might want to combine our educational resources with our personal resources. So by that, I mean like find a book that's written by somebody who experiences that identity in a way that feels really similar to you. So rather than having to go to your family to say, I'm going to tell my whole story, I want you to get it, we can find an author who wrote a book about what it means to be non-binary. Alok has a really great short one about their experience coming out as non-binary. Jonathan Van Ness has a book about coming out as non-binary. If you send me an email, I can help you find the perfect book about somebody with as many characteristics as possible in common with you who's come out as non-binary. But having those stories we can give to them is sometimes they're more likely to do it than if we send somebody an academic text. I have a lot of nonfiction books that I sent to my family members, and it was sometimes harder to get them to engage because they just weren't nonfiction readers. So I would find maybe a short YouTube video that explained things in a way that I liked. Or I would find a book, a memoir, that I thought they'd be more likely to resonate with. So PFLAG's got some great resources, finding a memoir that they might relate to, and then those support resources as well, encouraging them to go to a meetup of Transparent, or He, She, Ze, and We, or the Mama Bears, or PFLAG. Find some community where they can go to ask their questions that they might feel more comfortable doing than just coming to you directly, and take some of the load off of our own shoulders to be doing all of that teaching. How can we direct people towards other people they can talk to about it as well? And if you send me an email, I can give you a much more robust list of resources. Once we start to get towards the end of a talk, my answers start to be a little more like, I'll probably remember that tomorrow and wish I said something else instead. So send me an email and I can help you. And one other thing I'll say before we close out, we have some copies of my book over there. I'll let you say the housekeeping things about them. I like to play the reverse author game. Usually authors sign books for other people. I really like it if you'd sign my book for me. This is my copy of my book. I bring it with me everywhere I go to speak. On the days where it feels like I might be alone, I take this and I look through it and I just see all the signatures on all the pages. And remember that I am not alone in this. So feel free to sign my book. Please don't take it. This is my baby. Sign it. You can look through it. It's really cute. And I'll let you say the closing thing. Yeah, go ahead.
So to get you started on your resource journey, we have a resource table located over here. All of the resources on that table are free for you to take. Please take them, give them to your friends, your neighbors, unwilling strangers on the street, whatever you like. We also have some copies of Ben's book available here, and he will sign them, I think, too.
Yes, I will.
Yes, so you can trade autographs like the end of summer camp. And those are available for a suggested donation if you're able to do that. Also, remember, we're all going to take cookies when we go. And Ben will be around for just a few minutes if you have anything that you'd like to ask him. So thank you all for your time this evening. Thank you for coming.
Have a wonderful evening. Take some cookies. Come and hang out. I got a pile of business cards, so if you got to run but you want to be my friend, send me an email. Let's make it happen. Could you put them on the white table over there, maybe? That would be perfect. Thanks. Excellent. Thank you.
I'm in shock. Not shock. The best. Yeah.
Don't worry about book report.
It's a great area. I'm good. So fun.
Like I need them.